It's been screwed down, tightened up. Now I'm going to mix some thin set. So as you can see, it's been screwed down, tightened up, no squeaks. This is double layer of plywood on here. I am going to install the Ditra now. Ditra's over here. That's the Ditra over there. Uncoupling. It's very important. Make sure you vacuum the floor and get all the dust off it. Now I'm gonna wipe it down with some water. I'm gonna cut in all the Ditra, and then when I go to install it, I'm gonna wipe the floor down with water, get any residual dust out, and then flat trowel on plywood, then notch it out with the Ditra trowel, and then install my Ditra, my uncoupling membrane. So let's go ahead and do that. So why am I dampening the floor? Why am I sponging it down? Well, there are actually two reasons. The first reason is you vacuum the floor and you got as much dust off as possible. Sponging it down removes a lot of the residual dust. So the floor is going to be as clean as it possibly can be. The second reason is because plywood is very porous. It will suck moisture out of the thin set, and you don't want to suck all the moisture out of the thin set because then it won't bond properly. The thin set needs to retain the moisture so that it can grow its crystals and bond properly. Another thing that you need to take into consideration is the fact that you have to have the appropriate dry set mortar, known as thin set, that bonds to plywood. In this case, because you're going over plywood, you're going to need to use an ANSI A118.11 thin set or better. I have a video that explains everything about thin set. I will link to that. So there are a few things to take into consideration when installing an uncoupling membrane. Number one, you want to make sure that you have the correct size trowel. If the trowel is too big, you're going to get lumps of mortar under the uncoupling mat. If the trowel is too small, you're not going to have enough mortar to bond the membrane to the substrate. Also, you need to mix the mortar correctly so that it will transfer to the uncoupling membrane. Usually you're going to need to mix it looser than you would for setting tile. Check the directions on the bag for mixing instructions. As I mentioned earlier, you need to choose the correct type of mortar. In this case, it has to be an ANSI A118.11 or better mortar. Also want to make sure you key the mortar into the substrate. By keying, I mean use the flat side of the trowel to spread the mortar onto the substrate, forcing the mortar into the pores of the plywood in this case. Then once you've done that, then you can flip the trowel over, use the notch side of the trowel, and then lay your uncoupling mat into the mortar, and making sure that you actually press the membrane into the mortar, either with a roller or a wooden trowel or something that you can use to actually set the membrane into the mortar, so you can get good transfer from the mortar to the fleece on the back of the uncoupling membrane. So if you want, you can start setting tile immediately. However, I like to wait till the next day so that the mortar under the membrane can set. If you start installing tile right away and you have a large format tile and you have to lift a tile to adjust it for whatever reason, you run the risk of pulling up the membrane along with the tile. There's a way of doing it so that doesn't happen, but it can happen if you're not careful. And this is how you install an uncoupling membrane. In this case, it's Schluter Ditra. Because the Ditra is easy to install and quick, it's usually a good idea just to install it at the end of the day, so that way you don't waste a day waiting for the thin set to set under the Ditra. You come back the next day and you've actually pre-filled some of the Ditra with your leftover thin set, which is perfectly fine. I usually will cut in the first couple of rows so that I can mix my thin set and start installing tile immediately. So the first 2 rows are cut in and ready to go. I dry laid them. Now I'm going to pick them up and start installing the tiles. So the question is often asked, what kind of mortar can you use to set tile on Schluter Ditra? According to Schluter, if you want to maintain the warranty that comes with the product, you have to use either their all-set mortar, which is a modified mortar, or this set mortar, which is an unmodified mortar. If you want to use someone else's brand mortar, then you have to use a premium unmodified mortar. They will not warranty the installation if you use someone else's modified mortar. The reason for that is because they don't control the formula, so they can't predict or know what curing times are for the mortar and how long it will take. So if you want to use someone else's mortar, use an unmodified mortar. If you want to use a modified mortar, then go with the all set. I have to say, I use all set all the time. It's a great product. When you're installing the tile over the Ditra, you want to make sure you fill all the little waffles completely. They have a new and improved version of the Ditra. The new version is much easier to fill than the older version. You want to make sure it's completely full. You usually don't have to use the flat side of the trowel to fill the waffles. It actually fills fairly easily in the new version, so you can just use the notch side of the trowel to fill and spread the mortar and notch it out. When you're setting tile, the correct way to spread the thin set is always in a directional manner. You don't want swirls, you don't want waviness, you want all the trowel lines of the mortar going in one direction. If you're using a tile that is elongated and it's not square, then you usually want it to go the short way. Sometimes it's not possible because you're constrained by the space. You always want to have the mortar troweled out in straight lines. The size of the trowel is also important. You always want to make sure the trowel is big enough. You want to make sure that the trowel is the correct size so that you get proper coverage on the back of the tile. So typically, in a dry area, you want 80%, at least 80% coverage when you set the tile into the mortar. When you're in a wet area, you want to achieve 95% or better. So trowel size is very important. How you install your tile is also very important. Tiles are set, they're not placed. What does that mean? It means that you have to push the tile into the mortar. You have to set the tile. And you usually achieve that by placing the tile on the mortar, then pushing down and moving the tile side to side, at least the width of the notch on the trowel. A lot of people will use a mallet, other people will use vibrators. It doesn't matter how you achieve the required coverage as long as you achieve it. The most efficient way is to move the tile perpendicular to the trowel lines. So another thing that's very important is to make sure that you leave room for movement. A lot of people believe that you don't have to leave any room for movement for tile. You do have to. If you want to look it up, look up ANSI EJ 171. Every tile assembly needs room for movement. In a smaller job, usually you only need it around the perimeter of the tile. So make sure you leave a nice little gap. 1/4 inch is usually enough at the perimeter where the tile meets the hardwood floor, the tub, a wall, or whatever. Make sure you leave a little gap. At the wall, usually that gap will be covered by the baseboard. Where the tile meets the hardwood floor, usually you will fill that with silicone. If it meets the tub, usually that gap will be filled with silicone as well. Just make sure you leave room for movement. On larger jobs, you will need to install a movement joint in the field of the tile. Oh look, I almost forgot my tape measure.